Build more.
If you can keep your clients longer, thereby reducing your churn or increasing your retention, you factually speaking will generate more revenue.
And there really is something to delivering a fun, engaging, caring style of experience that has people feel like they want to come back. It's really important that in trainers, as you're writing your fitness programs and as you're trying to figure out what to do in 2025, I want to start with a story. And I used to work for this guy when I was at a big box gym. His name was, we'll call him Philippe, right? That was not his name, by the way. But Philippe was I would say probably a very average trainer. Like he never racked up a body count by way of hurting clients, but he also was never really delivering results. The way that he found clients was that he was good at sales and then, like naturally he just kind of had access to these people. But he was definitely the type of individual that would run like 8 clients back to back through the exact same workout. He wouldn't do assessments, he wouldn't write programs, but he delivered such a great experience during their time together, and he was really good at relationship building that people stuck around. And there really is something to delivering a fun, engaging, caring style of experience that has people feel like they want to come back, and it makes the journey more enjoyable. But I think that one of the keys in 2025 for people that want to stand out as trainers isn't just writing the programs. And if you are the program writer, you have to still be able to deliver an in-person experience that's going to cause people to want to be engaged. And what better way to do that than having fun with it, making the things and making the boring work actually fun. Right? Because we always hear this thing of, oh, you got to do the boring work, and people kind of like, oh, I'm going to turn into Eeyore because it's boring. And in fact, I knew some very successful business owners that said that things were boring, and they inherently drove away a lot of business because people didn't want to participate in something that even the person that was at the head of the company said was boring. Right? I was told that science was boring. Well, in reality, science can actually be great. That's why Bill Nye the Science Guy is a fucking show that's been on for decades. So that's my take on gamification and fun and why it's important. I mean, Steve, what place does having fun in a fitness program, what's your perspective on that? Is it essential or is
Well,
it bullshit?
before we even break that piece down, I just want to highlight a important fact real quick. If you can keep your clients longer, thereby reducing your churn or increasing your retention, you factually speaking will generate more revenue, generate more income, and have less chaos because you need to rely on your marketing and sales less. Just going to make sure that that is said. This is way more about service delivery, but from a business perspective, the longer you keep clients, the more money you make. It is directly related. So just throwing that out there.
No, that's great. And how much does it cost to replace a client? I mean, I don't know if that figure, but do you have anything around that?
So when I owned my gyms,
Yeah.
I knew that acquisition on a single client was roughly $900 in literal cold hard cash out the door.
Mm-hmm.
That's not including of any time investment in terms of the actual marketing, the thinking, the placing, the doing, the sales, the setting of an appointment time. All of those components add time as well, which is obviously valued at something. So for an easy conversation to acquire a client, let's say it's going to be somewhere in the range of $1,000. And that's from my studio's brick and mortar. I think from an online world, it's probably going to be less expensive, especially with social media, organic, email. There's way less expensive things.
Yeah.
Even Facebook ads, while everybody says they're more expensive, I don't think that they're as expensive of buying spots in newspapers and doing door hangers. But nonetheless, if you understand what your costs are, so how much did I spend by how many people I acquired over a period of time, you now know here's what my cost of acquisition is, generally speaking. But if you're going to go ahead and let's say $500, every $500 you spend, you get a new client in the door, but you only charge $250 a month and they stay with you for 3 months. Well, the first 2 months went to recouping the cost of your marketing. You still haven't even spent any money on your fulfillment yet, like your systems, your technology, your CRM, your whatever. You didn't pay yourself yet. Any of those pieces, and that money runs out really, really quick. And then if we think about it, okay, great, we know the break-even point. But from there, what if we can layer on 3 more months? That now is higher margin, pure profit, however your business is running, all of a sudden you completely change the landscape of your business. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's the way you want to think about it. How do I keep them long enough to make sure that I recoup all of my expenses and
Hmm.
then make money on the back end? And oh, by the way, the longer they stay with you, likely the happier they are, likely the more results they're getting, likely the more chance of referrals you have, which now that
Yeah.
kind of compound effect kicks in.
Yeah, I mean, it's you mentioned something around $1,000, and just to give people magnitude of like what we're talking about is effectively the average person, whether you're an online coach or a brick and mortar coach, can have about 30 hours of service delivery. Which, if you're doing online stuff, that's about 30 clients as a roster. If you took a year, you would spend $30,000 to acquire all 30 of those clients. And you hopefully would have them longer than however long it took. The longer you keep them, the less expensive it kind of was when you break it down into a monthly cost. If you only keep them a year, that's more or less like $83 a month is what you're spending to find that client. If you go 2 years and you're able to keep them, then that's $42 a month, right? So effectively, you're just looking at amortizing that, how long that client cost is going to stick around and be painful for you. If you're turning your clients over after 3 months, that's a $333 cost per month to acquire that client. And if you're only charging $250, you start to see how this becomes a losing battle. And that's why doing the little things as you're coaching and why education matters so much is that it empowers you to actually find and meaningfully solve these problems as they come up, thus demonstrating your value, thus keeping the client longer and decreasing or basically increasing how much profitability you have on the back end of that. So when we talk about gamification, it's not to fuck around and be funny. It really is to help you keep these clients longer and stop pulling as much of your hair out of like, where do I find my next one? Well, if you did a better job, sometimes you might keep them 18, 24, in 36 months. We find that it's usually best to plan for about a 12-month catch and release, where if you can deliver results, deliver on the promise in that span of time, you'll actually be able to generate better referrals, is the data that we collected out of company A's time, right? If you have them less, probably actually get a little bit more of a referral bonus because you can get people in and out of your doors real quick. But the idea is, how do you get people to goal and then have them have such a great time in that party with you that they now want to share that experience with some friends or family or people that they care about. And this is where you can start to grade yourself. Not to get too far down this rabbit hole, but like, would you trust your own mother with your coaching? That's like the top one, unless you hate your mom, and then that's a different conversation. But you know, would you trust a sibling, right? That's kind of like the next level down. Would you trust a cousin or would you trust a stranger? And if all you can say is like, hey, I would trust a stranger with my services and like, making sure that they had a good time, cool, make sure they get what they want. But we know that the closest family members are the people that you hold dearest. Using that as an idea of your quality of service is going to really help you start to understand where your gaps are probably going to be and what you should focus on in 2025, if it's not our workshops and live events or podcasts or whatever, right? So fun. Steve, what
Fun.
part does fun now of keeping clients longer?
Well, so and this is actually a exercise you taught me, but I always think about like fun and sometimes trying to find the answer can be challenging. Like, oh, I don't know what's
Mm.
fun. Well,
Mm.
I'm going to answer this in the inverse of I can tell you what isn't fun. And this is partially joking, but also at the same point in time, very real. And the what isn't fun is like, hey, our second exercise of this workout is going to be 7 sets of prone leg curls, and it's going to make it feel like your legs are going to explode. Now, I share that only because it's literally what I'm in the middle of doing. And in that moment, it's not fun. But I will say, you built this program, Andrew, and as we're going through it and testing it and making sure it works, one of the things really comes down to is, hey, very results outcome driven. So do I want more fun, or do I want my fun is some version of beating my last workout through something very hard? We're using a
Mhm.
specific app, and in my app I
Mm.
get to see, oh, last time you lifted this much and here's how much total weight you did. So now we transitioned this whole thing that is perceived by me in the moment as not fun into this app that now allows me to gamify or have fun with this thing.
Mhm.
And it's this, oh, okay, cool. Like, I want to beat it. It's not about how much this sucks. It's about beating this thing. And that's
Yeah.
partially because that's a motivator for me. Not everybody's going to find that motivating. So
Mhm.
understanding what motivates a person, what things transition to fun, or conversely,
Mhm.
what things transition to not fun is probably more
Mhm.
important. I remember training and it's like, hey, we're going to do something with a kettlebell. I'm like, oh, well, kettlebells hurt my wrist when I flip them around and I don't know how to do it. I'm like, oh, well, we're going to do kettlebell anyways because you need to learn the skill. And
Yeah.
like hindsight, 10 years ago, like, man, I was a moron. Like, you didn't, I shouldn't have forced the kettlebell on some of my clients because they didn't enjoy it. Now, I think kettlebells are a great tool. I think being
Mhm.
able to swing them around is a great skill. And I
Mhm.
think that people who want to be generally active need to know how to move things, not just a dumbbell barbell at some point in time. And that's why I pursued it. But the reality is, this person hated doing
Mm.
kettlebells and I refused to listen because in my mind, no, we're doing kettlebells because they're good for you. Well, guess what? This
Mhm.
person didn't have fun doing kettlebells. And that was one thing, like, again, meeting your clients where they're at, hindsight being
Yeah.
2020, was bad training moments for me. So
Mhm.
find out what they
Mhm.
like, find out also what they don't like,
Yeah.
avoid the don't likes, and maybe figure out like why don't they like it? Is it something we can work on?
Mhm.
Or is it no, I'm just gonna stay away because there's
Yeah.
48 other things I can do to help create a similar effect
Yeah.
if you right. So I think that
Mhm.
gamification in the app, what motivates them, those things become really key and important, and more so just staying away from the things that they absolutely hate, trying to understand why they hate them and seeing if you can help improve that skill. If you can work those things early on into your programming, the
Mhm.
likelihood is definitely going to increase of them wanting to stay with you.
Yeah, I think you highlight something really important in that people are inherently going to enjoy the things they feel like they're doing well at. And that's when we talk about the kettlebell, they're like, "Oh, man, this doesn't feel great." And how many trainers are like, "Don't be a pussy." Like, bro, it's not. It's like a 47-year-old mom. She's got 3 kids and she's trying to retire and she's a small. Like, there's just so many other things that make people, that create obstacles for people to master these things. And we know that mastery of a skill or a set of skills is strongly related, almost predictive of the level of enjoyment that people will have on the back end of that. And so the idea is, well, exactly what you just said, like what other ways can we get you to have the same stimulus? If we know that generally speaking, fitness is effective when your muscles hurt and you're breathing hard, how do you make that happen in the right area? Right. And someone says, I want to tone my legs. You're like, oh, toning's stupid. We're going to do upper body. You missing the boat, fam. Like, that's not how you're going to keep that client. And this is always, you hear a lot of coaches colloquially like simplify it up, give them a little bit of what they need while giving them a lot of what they want. And we know that it's easier to get people to enjoy things when they think that it's something that they want. So there is a level deeper of like, how do we get them to do the thing? But then also, how do we get them to want to do the thing that they need to do? And that's where it comes down to that relationship and building the ability for that trust, for that buy in of the client being like, oh, okay, I see that value. I trust that you know what you're doing and I'm having a good time while I'm doing it. And that's kind of the trifecta of the trust triangle that, I learned from James Fitzgerald over at OPEX like over a decade ago of your competency only matters in this little triangle to the degree that you care and you're reliable. Those three things will create a pretty robust thing. And you can kind of grade yourself on the trust triangle of like, if you do a really great job of caring for your clients and you're there and they feel warm, but maybe you always show up late, or maybe you like don't show up, or maybe you no show, or maybe you double book, like the reliability might be lower, but the caring might be higher. And that's going to reduce how much trust they're ultimately going to put into you. Conversely, you could be a super scientific asshole like I was early on in my days, care a lot, but not necessarily be the most articulate with that. And so that's where, you got to be able to meet people where they are and understand where you are in relation to that
Be,
to minimize the
you mean
coaching
be
friction.
timely to everything? Be timely to your appointments?
I mean, generally speaking, yeah.
You know,
There's a
it's
five
taken me
minute. There's a
It's
5 minute
taken me
rule.
3 years to realize you are just habitually 3 to 5 minutes late. And
Two is the goal.
I'm like, this is
Two is the
just
goal.
Andrew. Like, this is just Andrew. I'm like,
Lifetime
he's
did it to
going
me, bro.
against, in my mind, you're going against what you were taught in the Marines, where it's like, hey, you got to be 17 hours early to your thing all
Oh
the
yeah,
time.
I'm getting my time back.
And you're like, no, fuck you. Like,
Fuck
I'm
you.
showing up 3 minutes late consistently. So,
Well, it's usually like I'll look up and I'm like, oh shit. I'm like in the middle of doing something. And then I'm like, oh, I need to do this other thing. So, and I just like, I hyper fixate. And that's usually what causes me to be like, oh fuck, I need to stop this. But like, oh, let me just fix this one last thing. And in fact, I was an officer cannon at school at one time. And they were like, you got 60 seconds to clean your rifles. And I took the entire platoon that I was in charge of at the time. I was like, oh, they gave him 3 minutes. They're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Are you fucking? I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of slow. Like, the rifle just needed to be clean. And so I don't know. I'm probably mildly autistic, um, but there's definitely an element of
I
it's
just,
hard
I
for me
mean,
to leave things unfinished. And that's
I've,
usually what contributes.
I've just taken it as cool. I got 2 minutes to go, like,
Yeah.
grab water, pee, something like that. And I'm no longer going to stress about not being on time and early to my meetings, which is great. Like, it's been,
Yeah.
I swear to God, and it's funny. I've been watching TikTok, and there's one guy on TikTok that talks about, army and whatever and being on time. And I'm like, this is Andrew, but not, but now it just makes sense. So, anyways, so it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
opportune when you said, when you're always late. And I'm like, Andrew's always late. Andrew's always late.
Hmm. I'm reliable though. I'm reliable.
Reliably late. You are super consistent.
I'm consistent. And I think that when we talk about reliability, this is actually a really great conversation. Well, we need to talk about this. This is a good one because what does reliability look like for people in 2024? And like, this is where part of your brand is what you're setting people's expectations for when you show up for service delivery. And I love that. And I borrow this 5 minute thing from a company I used to work for called Lifetime. And they used to literally, trainers would be going back to back to back all day. And they would have this 5 minute buffer where people would rush in for the team meeting. They had time to heat up their food after the appointment. And then they would start the meeting 5 minutes after the hour. And it kind of allowed people that like decompression. And so if you're ever on a call with me or if I'm ever teaching, you'll notice that we don't start the lesson until 5 minutes after. It's usually soft shoeing, relationship building, talking, because
You'll
there is an
also
element
notice
of
we don't end the lesson until 3 hours
yeah,
after.
yeah. You're fucking up. I need a timekeeper. I need a timekeeper because my ADHD be going crazy like it is right now. So gamification, anyways, trust triangle, having fun. We're having fun right now, which is why we actually, I think, are able to stick and stay more consistent because there's an inherent interest in things we enjoy. And I think that how you create that is largely a function of what you find interesting. Because what you find interesting, you can then generate other people's interest or you'll pique their interest. It's like, and there's this thing on dating TikTok right now, which I think is hilarious. Um, and it comes up and like, it's a lot of girls that are saying like, I love when a guy just goes off onto his little tangents of getting excited about something and then just, kind of like word vomiting. And there's something to that I think is really important in sharing your interests and just being you. But as far as gamification goes and making sure that people are enjoying it, you have to be good trust triangle, very competent, very caring, very reliable, or we should say consistent. Um, now, what are some methods that people can do to have clients have a bad time? We'll do the contrast exercise that you mentioned earlier. How do we absolutely ensure that a client has a terrible experience?
I mean, thing number one is make them do exercises that they absolutely hate doing.
Yep, 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 yep,
I think that's like a super obvious. I'm going to make sure you're miserable. We're going to do the shit you hate to do.
yep, yep.
Um, and I think I'll throw a second one at you, and then I'll throw it back at you. But I think my second one is getting them to put a bunch of effort in
Mm,
and not achieving the outcome that they thought they were going to get.
mm, mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I'm saying that a little bit tongue in cheek, where the general idea is either A, they have randomly crazy expectations, and
Yeah.
or you are doing a shit job of explaining and,
Mhm.
and aligning and agreeing on what the expectation should be,
Yeah.
or you just don't communicate it at all. So
Yeah.
having them work really hard, pay money, spend time, be sore, don't eat things they don't want to do, and knock up results. Great way to make them hate
Yeah.
doing whatever it is they're doing with you.
100%. Mhm. Yeah, getting
So
getting
what's your
Jim, that former
what are
client of
your
mine,
top
eat.
two?
Oh man, how do you get people to absolutely hate the experience? I mean, it's usually, yeah, just make sure you don't meet their expectations in some way or the other, and don't communicate what those expectations should probably entail. And when I say that, it's like if someone, let me back up for a second. Oh, this is a good example, actually. Let me go forward. So, one of the best ways to do that is when someone comes in and says, "Hey, I want a tone," and you then over inform them on why toning is dumb. I used to do that. And I still see trainers do that. And it's so funny because you can tell who's a newer coach and who's been around the block a minute. Because you're like, you'll hear a client say something and you'll see the trainer just like kind of twitch. Their eyes will just get a little bigger. And you can tell this is where they've been around a little bit. They won't say anything and they'll kind of resist. But the brand new trainer's like, toning doesn't mean anything. That's stupid. Do you mean you want to get lean, or do you want to build muscular definition, or you want to build muscular hypertrophy? And oh man, I would fire the fuck out of a coach if they said some shit and they didn't verbatim give me back what I said that I wanted. Right? If you can't show you're listening, like why would I speak?
But yeah, and this has nothing to do with this episode, obviously, but that is a
Rabbit trails,
really,
guys. We're sick.
yeah, it's just gonna happen. But that is like super indicative. So you mentioned a newer trainer, so less
Yeah.
experience, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
the curriculum that they're learning and how they're teaching them,
Mm,
because they're taking this book learning, they're taking these words and definitions and potential situations that a book is explaining and saying that, oh,
mm,
toning doesn't actually mean anything, blah, blah, blah. Toning is a combination of reducing fat and increasing mass, blah, blah, blah. And that
mm, mm.
person now correlates this language into, that's how I speak to my clients, when the reality, the
Yeah. Yeah.
psychology of it is like that communication sequence isn't going to land the
Yeah.
way you want it to, because
100%.
your client is telling you, I want to lose fat and gain muscle.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't know how to articulate that. So they
Mm-hmm.
use the common words of tone. And you
Mm-hmm.
now need to go, oh yeah, I totally get that. Like, hey, what like toning in your mind? Like, what would that truly look like? Are we trying to get down where
Mm-hmm.
you can see this muscle? Or are we trying to get where you see that muscle? Like, give me a little more
Yeah.
detail on there, uncover what they
Mm-hmm.
want. And that's where like that communication cycle, the psychology of the coaching side of things
Mm-hmm.
becomes
Mm-hmm.
super important, because
Yeah.
now you go out of this like, this nerd, like I got my cape and know all the scientific crap, that you have no idea what I'm saying, and you become relatable. And that relatability means you now can influence that person significantly more, because you inherently build trust and you're able to get them to do the initial phases of what you need them to do to see the kind of starter results. So again, not
Yeah.
going at any companies, like you need a base level of knowledge, but that communication psychology
Yeah.
thing is super important.
I will
For
say
example, I
this.
first met Andrew. Is all of the words that Andrew used, I'm like, do you have like a dictionary and thesaurus up in front of you? And you're like speaking 10 seconds earlier and it's telling you, no, use this 48 syllable word when you're talking. I literally had to say, Andrew, I feel like I need to look
Mhm.
at a dictionary when we're talking, and in a nice way, but it was like, you're not fucking relatable. Cool, you're smart. I get it. I got you, bro. Got you. But but like it's just,
Yeah,
it's an example, right? And it's one of those
yeah.
things.
Yeah, it's actually something that I'm told frequently is that people think, "Oh, you're really smart," and I actually get really self conscious when people say that because I don't intend on doing that. It's just it's a weird conversation of like, do we bring people up? Do we lower ourselves? We'll talk about that at a different point when we're talking about authenticity, but yeah, it's something I'm actually wildly insecure about. But here's something when we talk about communication, I think your nose like right on, spot on. Communication is so important, and that was gonna be my second one of like what could you do to potentially really mess up an experience and not clarifying, but here's a 3-step framework that I think is really important. If you want to make sure that you are a good, compelling communicator, you need to make sure that you express curiosity and you're genuinely trying to find things that you're interested in because it'll help you be more curious. Number two in the framework is that you have to clarify, meaning don't make assumptions. Hey, I heard you say this. Hey, I heard you say you wanted a tone. Can you explain to me what that means to you so we're on the same page? Because one of the biggest things that is a symptom of miscommunication is that when someone says tone, you say, okay, cool. I think that means you want to lean out, we're going to put you in a caloric deficit. We're going to do all these things that are associated with that instead of what they mean, which is maybe they want a bigger muscle to fill out their skin a little more, yada, yada, yada. And so now you're going to have different expectations of the outcome, which is why step number 2 of clarifying is so important. And as you continue to be curious and as you clarify, eventually you will confirm your interpretation and confirm that you're both on the same page. So you want to be curious, you want to clarify, and you want to confirm that you're moving in the same direction, which requires some back and forth. And if you do that, you're generally going to be a lot less frustrated. That means your client's going to be less frustrated, and ultimately you guys are going to have a really good time. It's like being on a good date, right? Part of that date is understanding, like, hey, what do you think about politics? Hey, what does this mean to you? Hey, yada, yada, yada. And when you start to have those open conversations, there's a liveliness that kind of emerges that makes it so much more of a enjoyable experience versus someone that has a guard up, they don't really care, and the other person doesn't really know how to navigate that because they're not inherently curious, or they shut down, and it's a whole thing. So all that to say, yes, I am dating right now. So
I,
that's why these things are
I
painful.
want to
But
be, I want to go to a restaurant and sit
oh
at a
no,
table like 4 tables away where I can clearly see you, your
the language
face,
legit.
and your date's face. But I want like one of those ear things in your ear where I want to like, hey, Andrew, you
Practical
have
Joker
to like
style.
every other question has to be a question that I ask just to see reactions and how you handle it. Because if you're going in and you're like, hey, what do you think about having kids? What do you think about politics? And what religion do you follow? Also, are you sure you like Asians? I'm curious. Like, I want to see that and I want to stoke that fire because I just think it's highly entertaining.
You
Um,
know, it
so
would probably be maybe if you guys are nice and if you guys subscribe and follow us and DM us enough that you want to see a GoPro version of my date, like maybe we'll
that
hook you
would be
guys up. I'll tell
hysterical.
you what, it probably would be. You know what? And if you guys want, we can put it on the close friends stories because I can't make some of this stuff public. But I'll keep y'all
Oh,
updated
that's
if you
funny.
want it. You got to comment below in the YouTube video, though, if you want Andrew's dating stories, because we'll start with some segments on that as
That's
Andrew tries to
funny.
find love, which I don't think love exists in 2025 because everyone's fucking jaded. Y'all are all fucking burnt, son. Y'all need to
Oh
get over
man.
yourselves. I
You
love
sound
it.
jaded and burnt right now. Just
I'm
saying.
I'm getting tired of it. I'm getting tired of them
Just
showing
saying.
up. Oh my god, there was one girl I went on a date with, and it was wild because in the first hour she was just like slamming drinks, bro. I'm like, this ain't it. I'm gonna get up out of here. It's
Oh,
just, ugh. Anyways, so that's why coffee is always the first date. That's the move, or walk. Let's talk about some shit. And if you don't want to walk and you're not into fitness, you're
oh,
not
see,
gonna
I
be
want to
fit
go.
nothing.
When I was dating, it was like I want to go do an activity that's a little bit straining. Like, let's
Yeah.
go do skeet shooting, or let's go do some like bouldering
Like
and rock
rap
climbing,
skeeter or like white people skeet shooting.
just to just to see
Urban
the
skeet?
response to a potentially stressful situation.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and I now do that married and as a dad, and I'm like, we're gonna go out and do something really stressful, wife and
Mhm.
kid, and just see how you handle it. Not that it's gonna change anything, but I'm just gonna get entertainment out of this now.
And
Um,
listen, and I think that bring it back to the episode. That gamification, having fun with it, makes us want to do the thing more. And
yeah,
so I'm over that shit of like, let's go and have some drinks. Like, I will not do that again. I'm good. I want to be in bed 10:30, 11 at the latest. I'm not here to fuck around until 3 a.m. Y'all are wild. I have some friends that do that shit like 3, 4 times a week, and they're like, "Why do I feel so bad?" I'm like, "I love you to death, but that is the dumbest shit, and you're about to age yourself so fast. I don't even know what to tell you, But I like you got to play the game a little bit, and you're like, "Oh, you gotta go." No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. So you
very
guys got
nice.
hot single
Dating
friends.
dating 101 for Andrew, but
Make it
so
fun.
when we think about the idea keeping clients longer, we know there's a direct
Yep.
correlation to making more money in your business. We
Correct.
also know there's a direct correlation or maybe an inverse relation to burnout because the
Mm-hmm.
longer you keep
Mm-hmm.
clients, the more consistent things are, the less
Yeah.
you need to worry about some random shit, i.e., marketing and sales. That helps you as well.
Mm-hmm.
We just delivered four, kind of keys and
Yeah.
communication, make it fun, gamification, some of the I definitely wouldn't do, build that trust. Like it
Yep.
all sounds super rudimentary. It all sounds super basic. And as you're listening, there's probably a level of like, oh, yeah, I do that already.
Yeah.
I'm going to call bullshit. And it's funny, this morning in the sauna, I was listening to one of my Spotify kind of podcast things in the morning, and it was Kobe Bryant talking about being a great basketball player, right?
Mm,
And one of the things he said is like Shaq was the best and most gifted basketball player that was, but he was lazy. And that's why he was not and will not be the greatest player that there was. But when I came in, he could have been that person.
mm,
He goes, I came in and I wasn't the best. And I forget specific timelines and whatever, but it wasn't NBA. But he came in his first season in the summer, whatever. He didn't score points. And he went back, and it wasn't necessarily an athleticism issue, it was a basics issue. And
mm,
he worked on the basics relentlessly for hours a day, shooting,
um,
2 points, off the board, rebounding, like the basic things. It wasn't let me do this fancy 3-point shot from half court. It wasn't do all this dribbling between legs, all these things. It was I need to get the basics and fundamentals down, so much so that my athleticism doesn't matter.
mhm,
And then he became the Kobe Bryant that we all grew to know. And he eventually LA Lakers, all these things. And, it just, when you hear him say it from his point of view, it's pretty enlightening to think about. He considers himself not a great athlete, but rather really good at understanding the basics he has to work on.
mhm.
This is that kind of thing where we have to focus on that.
Yeah. I mean, there's the whole term that CrossFit brought to light, which is the idea of virtuosity, which is mastering the basics. And I think that, there's this circular thing that happens when people first start off of like, how do I do the sexy stuff? How do I stand on a Bosu ball and do a thruster on a single leg? And you're like, that's not even fucking relevant to someone's fitness goals. Like, what's wrong with you? But yet we have curriculums, and I will say, like, and I'm not afraid to say this, but we'll take our percentage for giving them some attention, is that the NASM CPT is trash. Like, and I used to teach it for a lifetime. And when I'm thinking about like their OPT model, like, what the fuck are we talking about? Stabilization? Like, go do some machines and actually generate some intensity and generate some results. Like, you have to provide that stuff. But
Listen, bicep curls on the Bosu are way better than bicep curls.
oh my God. When it was like stand on one leg and do some shoulder press on off, I was like, we're not going to teach you any of this. And I would stay, and I still say this, that until we release our certification here in the upcoming year, like NSCA probably has the best bare bones, no frills. CPT that exists. ISSA is very similar to NASM. And like, I get it. It provides people a good foundation, but please evolve beyond that with your own experiences. There are some good things in there, but overall their training philosophy I tend not to very agree with. And so, but their CES course helps you understand some good biomechanical stuff. However, it's also flawed pretty significantly. So, but they serve a purpose. My point is that there's a circular development of like people start with like what do I do, and they get very simple, and then they start adding all these like super crazy nuances like, well, we have to rest exactly 77 seconds before we get to the next thing, and like you're like, bro, and then like it has to be 13 reps per set, and like you're like, okay, cool. And that's like usually the turning point where they realize, then they get frustrated, and then like the nuance actually clouds the client's experience. They're like, oh man, this shit doesn't work. And they'll start getting lazy or whatever. And they stop doing the things. And they actually start having better results by not injecting so much crazy, complicated shit. And so both the beginning and the end is very simple. And the people, as you gain mastery of these skills, these competencies, these experiential delivery service items, like you just learn that, like, I still need to do this basic thing. We still need to squat, push. We need to, generally push, pull, squat, hinge, some kind of core stability and locomotion. Like those are the 6 things that you should incorporate. What kind of squat do you need to do? When does a leg press become more relevant than a back squat? Because back squat is a little more technological or technically intensive, and maybe someone doesn't have the coordination for that, and you're going to spend all this time teaching them how to back squat for 60 minutes when now their legs aren't necessarily going to have as much intensity that they could have had it. You just put them on a fucking leg press and a close kinetic chain movement. So my point is that keep learning, but always keep it as simple as possible, because the consumer doesn't know the things that you know. And the more complexity it has, especially for non-skilled people, right? The more skilled they have, the more complexity it needs to be so that they're engaged. But new people just want to know, like, hey, what do I got to do for these 50 minutes I'm with you? And then what should I do multiple times a week? And how do I make that enjoyable? Well, it has to be the simplest version that they can do well, and then maybe a little bit of a challenge in there. If someone
One,
can leg press, do a goblet squat. They can goblet squat, try a back squat, try a front squat, try an offset kettlebell single arm front rack squat, try suitcase deadlift, different things like that. Those are the progressions, regressions we'll talk about in a future episode.
well, and like you said there, here, kind of
Mm.
last sentence.
Yeah.
They hired you so they don't need to know all the things.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not
Mm-hmm.
here for the lesson and all that stuff. Somebody might be curious, sure, but on average,
Yeah.
a client hired you so you don't need to, so they don't need to know everything because now they have you. But with
Imagine a
that being
plumber
said,
explaining everything.
with that
Oh,
being said, that's why we're going to leave it here and go down a single path for you guys to learn the thing.
yeah.
Outside of that, though, we appreciate your time. Have a fantastic day. If you haven't looked into our January in person event, we're going to be talking about psychology, mindset, how that applies to coaching, those communication pieces that we
Mm-hmm.
just spoke
Mm-hmm.
about. So reach out, ask some questions, look for some details on there. Best thing you can do for us if you found this useful was subscribe. Again, thanks for spending time with us here on Beyond the Pump, the podcast for coaches by coaches, where we break down the business of fitness and nutrition. Peace.
See you guys in January.